Hello, everyone. So we're going to get started on time. I see that we've got a few people filtering on in, so it's nice to see you all. But we'll start right on too, just because we've got quite a bit of content to get through today. Great, and there we are. It's 2 already. It's nice to see you all coming through. There's 15 of you so far, but we will get started. So hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. So welcome to the new folks, and hello again to those of you who are in our August and September masterclasses. Please let us know where you're tuning in from. As many of you all know, I'm tuning in from Greenville, SC, South Carolina, not to be confused with North Carolina. So let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. And while you are letting me know, I'm going to share some information about today's sessions. So we'll have around about a 25-minute class today. It is a little bit longer, followed by 5 minutes of Q&A. So although the chat is on, please do place any questions that you have in the little Q&A bubble that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. And also this session is being recorded, so you're more than welcome to share it with your colleagues or anyone else who couldn't make it today. Great, and it looks like we've got Addie tuning in from Duluth, Minnesota. Hello, Addie. And it looks like we've already got a question, so I'll check that out at the end. Oh no, it's Dave tuning in from Baltimore. Hi, Dave. Nice to see you. Glad you found the Q&A there. Great. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Laurie, and I lead both the software and services teams for Upright and Neatoscan as the VP of Customer Experience here. So I've been in customer operations and people operations for over 8 years, and I really like to remove friction in people's lives so they can do what lights them up. In a previous life before Upright, I actually spoke to companies and spoke on people operations and leadership. So that's why I'm facilitating this class on, attracting and retaining A-class e-commerce teams today. I'm joined by Addie Byrne, who is absolutely exceptional. She's our Director of Client Engagements with Upright Labs, and she leads the services team. So not only does she lead a team herself, but she also leads a lot of e-commerce managers to help them with their hiring and help them with labor analysis. And she's going to be joining us in the Q&A. So last month we spoke about enhancing and sourcing more product and high value product. But none of this product sourcing would be possible without your greatest resource, your people. So we know that many of you have had staffing and hiring challenges, especially since the pandemic. So today's masterclass is focused on exactly that. We're going to share information about attracting incredible staff, training your team efficiently, and we'll also share insights on how to retain your team. For the few of you who were at the Goodwill webinar a couple of weeks ago that I facilitated with Amy from Goodwill Columbus, there is some repeat information, but this class is specifically geared towards e-commerce managers. So it'll be a lot more relatable to you rather than more so the HR professionals. So let's get started. First up, let's chat about attracting the right people for your organization. So there's a couple of components to attracting the right people. As an e-commerce manager, you're probably not in full control of all of these things, as many of you will have an HR department. But there are some proactive steps that you can take to make your organization more attractive to prospective employees. So some of you might not be hiring for many roles right now. For those folks listening today, focus on your employer branding and employee retention, which we're going to dive into later on in this class. If you are currently understaffed, focus on attracting the right people now by writing an incredible job description or job advertisement. It's really, really important to get that portion right so you can attract the right people to apply. So first up, let's chat employer branding. Your HR leaders will have a large impact on your region's employer branding, such as optimizing your Indeed, your Glassdoor, and your LinkedIn public profiles. You might also have some specialized folks who attend career events to fill up that talent pipeline. But as an e-commerce manager or e-commerce director, there are a few proactive steps that you can take to increase your employee experience, making your organization more attractive to prospective employees. So first up, collect reviews from happy employees and showcase positive experiences publicly outside of the company. So many organizations have Indeed and Glassdoor profiles that employees can review, and many humans have somewhat of a negativity bias where they'll freely share information when it's not ideal. So it's really important for you to nudge happy employees to review their employee experience. So ways that you can do this are, taking advantage of when somebody's really, really happy. So if you have a particularly wholesome one-on-one, that might be a really great time to do it. Also in public forums or via email, if you know that you have a pretty positive team culture. And your HR team could also advise you on what makes sense for your company culture as well. Another really good time to ask for reviews can be a part of your onboarding strategy, such as a part of that 3 or 6 month check-in when your employees are really, really excited about getting started with you all. Personally, here at on the Upright Lab side of things, after launching an employer branding strategy, we just asked everyone in a Slack channel. So it was a public forum. And after 3 months, we had 12,000 brand impressions on Glassdoor. And one of our newer employees at that time said that they were further motivated to apply for roles because they saw the positive reviews on Glassdoor. So they can make a real impact. Something else that's attractive to prospective talent is company culture. When reviewing some client Glassdoors, there was actually one Goodwill one that I noticed in particular, and they shared internal promotions and they shared employee events within their Glassdoor profiles, which was really, really nice to see. So if you've struggled with a strong pipeline of talent, but you know that your organization is an incredible place to work, definitely work with your HR team to get these positive experiences and team events or internal promotions public and a good review acquisition strategy. Another two things that you're going to need to focus on increasing your employee experience is developing your own leadership skills. That's really important. And also increasing organizational effectiveness and efficiency. These last 2 points don't only enhance the employee experience, but they also help with your employee retention. So here's a table of some leadership skills that you can start honing in on. So the goal is to become a really great leader rather than just a boss. At the end of the day, most of our teams are adults and they like to be treated like adults. So I'm just going to provide a few examples here, not the whole list, otherwise we'll be here for an hour. But as an example, really great leaders, they inspire growth rather than fear. So instead of saying, hit these numbers or else there'll be consequences, you won't get this or you won't get that, somebody who inspires growth would make a statement and ask a question. So for example, yesterday we hit 200 listings. What do we need to do today to get to 250 listings? So that's an example of inspiring growth. Another example is relying on servitude rather than relying on authority. Authority is often telling the team what to do with no questions asked. They influence through status. A leader based on service is focused on what they can give or how they can serve. They listen to what's needed and then they lead by example. So they influence their team through trust. Another skill that I've actually had to focus on in my career throughout this is to listen more than you speak. I'll never forget one of my previous leaders, she would say, whoever's doing the speaking is doing the learning. And if you notice, I do like to speak. I've been at it for the last 8 minutes. So great leaders do listen more than they speak. And the way they do that is by asking questions. And then when they're asking questions, they seek to understand rather than seeking to respond. So don't get me wrong, there is a balance to this. Sometimes you will need to pay a closer eye to an employee's actions when trying to improve their performance. And sometimes you won't have the time to ask a team member to do something. You will probably need to tell them sometimes. And sometimes you will need to speak to inspire confidence. As a leader, if you're not speaking at all, you're probably not inspiring either. So there's some sort of balance. But my recommendation today is, especially when you get this slide deck afterwards, is to pick one of these leadership behaviors to embody over the next month and to develop on, and take note if it changes your team culture positively. You'll know you're doing a really great job when you start to see more self-motivation in your team. So this looks like your team coming to you for advice on how they can exceed their goals. Your team feeling empowered to share their ideas with you, and your team proactively raising issues rather than withholding information. In leadership, no news is good news isn't ideal. If you're getting more news from your employees, typically you're gaining more trust. So next, how can you make your organization more efficient? A lot does come down to those leadership skills that we just spoke about, but let's take it a step deeper here. So when building an effective and efficient organization, you're going to set clear goals. So a lot of you do have really quantifiable metrics with the amount of orders coming through, with your product flow, and also with the listings per day. These are really helpful to get your teams to have something to work towards, and it facilitates a positive team culture when executed correctly. Next, you're going to motivate your team by celebrate wins. So once they hit those goals, share some sort of appreciation. Similar to the leadership habits on the previous slide, you're going to want to encourage more than you critique. I remember I was with one Goodwill organization and they had really huge listing goals. They were three-figure listing goals for each person. And what the e-commerce manager did every time they hit those listing goals per day, they would go around giving knuckle punches and the team would call them knuckles. And if that leader wasn't out there like quick enough, everyone would be like, hey, where's Knuckles? Hey, where's Knuckles? And it was just a really cool way that you can celebrate wins in a way that actually doesn't cost money. So that's definitely a good way to start thinking about things. Third, communication is key in a leadership position. We'll move on to training in a moment, but you're going to want to communicate in multiple different ways with folks because some people connect with written communication, others get fired up from a team huddle, and others need that one-on-one instruction. So get really curious about communication styles and communicate with your team regularly. Lastly, if you want to increase your organizational efficiency, you need to be visible so you can understand your team's pain points and develop solutions for them that are going to simplify their system. As you're providing that clear and regular communication in multiple mediums, ensure that you're continuously collecting and responding to valuable feedback and understanding your team's unique challenges. You're not only the voice of your customer, but you're also the voice of your team. Often they have some brilliant ideas to simplify that system, things that you've never thought of to help their tasks become more effective and efficient. Great, so now we've spoken about how to increase your employee experience to impact the branding of your department. Let's talk about the reactive talent acquisition, which typically is the job posting. So this is your first chance that people have to evaluate your organization and decide whether they want to work with you. So first up, the most important, especially because we work with a lot of nonprofits, share your company mission. So many on this class have an extremely strong company brand and really strong missions. And Simon Sinek says people don't buy what you do, they buy into why you do it. So make sure you share that really, really honestly. Next, you're going to want to focus on the daily duties of the task. And there's two tips I'll give you when you're writing this. First, you want to make sure that first word is action-based or it's a verb. And you're also going to want this concise as well. People want to really quickly understand what they're doing. Putting yourselves in the shoes of the person who's looking for a job, they're bombarded by hundreds of different jobs on Indeed. So you're going to want to make yours very much to the point. Next, the skills that they're going to need for the position so they can evaluate whether they'd be a good fit. But finally, definitely try to make your benefits or your value provided by the company really transparent. And something I'd recommend for all of you to do is to consider what your unique value proposition is. So do you allow listers to list from home? Do you not require a university degree or a high school diploma? Are those not requirements? Do you have some sort of unique membership program that no other employer has? Or perhaps you'll simply accept folks who will meet 60% of the skills required. A technique I do see some companies using is often, women and folks within a minority will apply for jobs when they're at 100%, but others will when they're 60%. So maybe that's a really quick win you can take away to help more people apply for the jobs. So these four components are really important to ensure that you're attracting as many people from those applications that you do have out there. So next up, we want to train your staff really quickly and efficiently. So there's going to be 3 steps that we're going to touch on today to help you do exactly that. So first is using adult learning principles. Next is employing multiple learning formats. And then the third is to get them learning by doing as soon as possible. So let's chat about some adult learning principles. These 5 points are a really, really great start to implement some basic adult learning principles. So first up, tell stories or real life examples throughout the training. So you'll notice that I've shared personal stories, and I've also shared stories of clients, and I've also shared stories of observations. So that's really important because adults remember stories rather than remembering facts and figures and frameworks. Adults also often tie their own experiences to training. So, in a one-on-one setting, ask ask questions that may facilitate an internal story for an employee. So, for example, let's say you're teaching somebody how to value an item. Maybe a good question would be, have you ever found something in your home that was worth a lot of money, that was unexpected? How did you research that to find out? And then from there, you'll be able to tie in the learning. Next, set goals so that they can measure progress. So let's say a fully stood up lister within your department is able to list 100 items per day, or that's the expectation anyway. Maybe you set numeric goals for week 1 and for week 2, and then there's another goal by week 4. You will no longer need approval to do a listing. Ensure those goals are laid out for adult learning. Also tie back to the why, and the why is often your commercial revenue, or it's tying back to your buyer experience. So getting your employees to be in the shoes of your buyers. So let's just say a new lister title something like PB base. A really great way to tie back to the why is to say, if you're a buyer on Shop Goodwill or eBay, what would PB vase mean to you? And often they'll coach themselves to learning that, hey, acronyms aren't ideal. I probably should have put Pottery Barn vase in there. And now they have a lived experience to remember this. So their learnings must also be applied immediately to help with their retention. And adults also like autonomy when they're learning. So we'll get on to that now. One of the best ways to apply learning autonomy is to leverage different learning styles. So your learning resources should work for audio learners, visual learners, written learners, and folks who learn by doing, which are kinesthetic learners. So for self-reflection right now, a really good test is, those like IKEA furniture in a box things, or just any, you order from Wayfair and get furniture in a box. Do you find yourself reading the information, looking at the pictures, or do you find yourself looking for a QR code to try to look at a video or something? So that's a really, really great way for you to understand that. But the best way to help you understand your team style is simply by asking. Some people will be already aware, and you can use that example to figure it out. And by being curious throughout the process as well. So you may give them a few different methods and see what they're gravitating towards and observe. It looks like the chat's just been turned on. So nice to see you, Anthony, in Duluth, Minnesota. Great. Now, learning by application is also really important. So the best way to do this is simply by being hands-on, or having your supervisor be hands-on and working with them at a station, and remembering whoever is doing the talking is doing the learning. So this second point, asking questions to check understanding. So let's just say you see something that isn't quite standard. You would ask questions about that specific thing. So why did you use the acronym PB instead of typing out Pottery Barn? And then they'll be able to facilitate their own learning, and you'll be able to guide to help them understand the buyer experience a little bit more. And lastly, you do want to test that knowledge and test those skills as well throughout the process. So we've spoken about attracting staff. We've spoken about training staff. Now let's move on to retaining staff. Retaining staff is often kind of like sales. It's more expensive to hire new ones than to retain the current ones. Now, first off, I would like to share, there's some things that you're in control of, and there's other things that you have less control of. One of the leading reasons why people leave a company is their experience with management. Of course, pay, feeling valued in that way also comes into it. but typically you will have less control over pay, benefits, and working location. The reality is some roles can't be remote, but you have a really strong way to impact the employee experience, which we've spoken about, performance management, and team culture. So we're going to focus in this last bit here on empathy and performance management. So a really great framework to develop empathy with your team, and I'll share an example shortly, is by using DISC, which is a personality style matrix, if you will. The reason I personally really like DISC is because it's quite easy to get people in. Not that we're all in boxes, but we do lean to one way or the other. You just need to ask two questions to try to understand folks. First, are they more task or people focused? Second, are they more forthright or more reserved? Often the more forthright folks will come into your office and come to you and tell you all the problems immediately, whereas others you'll need to ask a lot of questions to kind of draw that out. So personally, I'm definitely more on this directive and influencer side of things, very, very forthright. And a pet peeve for me is when I email into support or something in my daily life, and I get paragraphs of information when I ask one question. That's something I'm working on with patients. But that goes to show, for me personally, in a self-awareness tool, I'm definitely more directive and influencer. And if I'm hit with conscientiousness, which is more focused on the why, sharing all the details, because that's their way of providing all the value to you, I've had to learn to develop empathy in those situations. So as a leader, it's understanding how different team members are motivated. So with a conscientious team member, I'm going to need to provide more details, even though it's not my natural tendency, but also be patient with those details as well. So I know this is a very surface level of DISC, but I think a really good thing for all of you to take away of is to self-reflect yourself and think, what box do I sit in and what am I most triggered by? And what you're most triggered by can actually affect how you send and mean information. So when we're communicating, we're definitely in these boxes here. And what we're in control of is how we send a message to our team, and how we mean a message to our team. We're not in control of how they receive it, but we can influence how they receive it by checking ourselves in how we send and mean something. So scent is definitely those micro behaviors. So the tone, are we more aggressive and short and impatient? Or are we more calm and soothing and slower paced? It's also the place in which you send the message as well. Am I in a public place or am I in a private place? Meaning is probably the most nuanced thing. So it's to do with your history, it's to do with your upbringing, it's to do with your personality, and it's to do with your triggers. So using that same example, me being more on the ID side, I can come across as more forthright, direct, and maybe that's a lot to some people because that might trigger people. But also I may have more impatience as well. So that's something I definitely need to keep mindful of and think, okay, how can I change how I mean this message? So even though I'm asking for a direct answer, they know that they're not in, air quotes, trouble, which no one really is in trouble, but definitely reflect your own history and upbringing on this one. And that's how you can influence how things are received. And when someone's receiving a message, they're also receiving it through the filter of their own life. So if they've always had an issue with authority, maybe no matter what you say, you need to build up a lot of trust before that message is received well. So this is definitely a way to become more aware of your triggers, to observe how you're treating different employees in different situations, because we're all human, and to observe your own stresses and how that might affect your delivery. Lastly, having a clear performance management process. And this is two-pronged. So to retain your top talent, you're going to need to coach poor performance and nurture high performance. The impact of not coaching, poor performance, that moderate performers and high performers will end up feeling like their work is devalued, especially when benefits and salary is similar. They'll think, I'm getting the same amount of money to put in all of this effort. To coach poor performance, there's 3 avenues that you can go down. Coaching, which is making observations, asking questions to facilitate learning. You can also train your team. So training is using the principles that we shared earlier to give some additional time training. And performance management is usually more formalized in conjunction with HR and your leadership. On the other end of the spectrum, it's important to nurture high performance, and the impact of not doing so is also employees feeling as though their work isn't valued due to a lack of direct recognition for their efforts. So you can facilitate this through, and a lot of this comes down to the organizational effectiveness and efficiency. So setting those clear KPIs, celebrating wins, conducting regular performance conversations, and promoting internally where possible. A tool that you can use to facilitate your performance management process is a 9-box. So if you take a look on the screen here, you'll see that there's a performance section and a potential section. So you're going to determine metrics for potential versus performance. Often performance is more qualitative, whereas performance is more quantitative, so 200 listings per day or whatever that metric is, whereas potential is more qualitative. So, willingness to help others and more of those behavior aspects. So performance is the what, behavior, potential is the how, and both are really important. Once you, in conjunction with your leadership and HR team, define these, you can use this framework here up on the screen to assist with development conversations and succession planning. So the orange on the screen often relates to poor performance, and the blue is nurturing the high performance. So you'll be able, when you get this this slide out, you'll be able to go between these two to see, okay, in the bottom left, that means I'm looking at the coaching poor performance section, and I'm going to start looking at performance improvement plans because they've already been in these more faded sections, and we've already focused on the coaching and the additional training. And then when you're looking at the blue here, moving back to the other one, you're going to look at nurturing high performance. So you can use both of these slides as a tangible tool to help you understand, once you've got the matrix of the performance and the potential, how you're going to work with each employee within this 9-box framework. So today you've learned how to write an incredible job description, contributing to your employee branding, and you've also developed some skills to enhance your employees. You've learned how to apply basic adult learning principles, and you've also got a couple of tools to take away with developing a clear performance management strategy. So I really, really enjoyed chatting about this today. As you could tell, I'm almost at the 30 minutes, so I could chat about this for hours, but I would love to know what your questions are. So Addie and I are available to ask you whichever questions you have. We've got Amina from Seattle. Great. And we've also got Chase from South Florida. So assuming the Q&A is open, is there anything that anyone wants to know? Was there a section that most resonated with you, Addie, while we're waiting for a question to come through?
Yeah, I was just thinking in my transition from an individual contributor to a manager, one of the biggest surprises to me is how much a manager doesn't answer your question, but instead paves that pathway to where to find the answer. I thought I had to have an answer to every single question that people came to me with, but I was more so that person that was able to easily facilitate, these are where resources are, this is how you can learn and answer that question. And that was, my job became a lot less intimidating once I realized that I was more of a facilitator and less of an endless wealth of knowledge.
I love that. And that was a really similar experience that I actually had, Addie, because I started as a very young leader. I was promoted when I was really young, and I had people double my age that I was leading. And I'm like, how have I got to know more than this person? And just learning that you're actually there to facilitate a conversation is just, it takes the pressure off, and you learn a lot as well. I feel as though leadership is such a privileged position to be in because you learn so much from your team. Great. Well, it looks like there aren't any questions today, so we'll go ahead and close. But if you do have any questions, please do feel free to email me at laurie@uprightlabs.com or laurie@neatoscan.com. Either will work. And apart from that, we'll see you at the next masterclass. And thanks so much for joining today. Oh, looks like we do have a question from Yesenia, just as I signed off. So Yesenia said, do you provide videos on step-by-step on the system that we can facilitate to our new hires. And Yesenia, are you talking about Upright Lister or Neatoscan books? So for Upright Lister, there are some product flow videos, and perfect. There are some product flow videos that Jonathan Conda and myself have. So what I will do is after this, I'll send you an email. And because you've asked in this public forum and others may want to know, I'll send it in the follow-up to this as well so that all of the participants can receive it. Great,
Lori,
thanks so much.
we got a question in the Q&A here from Anthony from Duluth, Minnesota Goodwill.
Perfect.
What are the primary red flags for you when hiring? I have a couple answers to that. And so I'll start, Lori, and then pass it to you. I really look for a client, or not a client, a candidate that is engaged. And so if a candidate doesn't have any questions in the job interview, that to me is a red flag about not being very interested in the type of work that we do. I would also say, I just lost my train of thought there. Lori, I'll pass it to you while I find my train of thought again.
No worries. One that comes up to me for me is all of the little actions. So as a leader, but also for them, those little actions add up. So are they on time? And if they are on time, how early did they get there? Did they send a follow-up thank you? All of those little niceties. So all of those little like qualitative things really do add up. And a red flag is if they're only just on time, they're looking disheveled, if there's no thank you follow-up. All of those things are really big red flags. Of course, there's also some, skill red flags for me, but honestly, those like what I view to be basic sort of like timekeeping things are really, really important for me throughout that process because they're putting on their best. I don't know the word right now. Words are hard today for me. They're trying to put on like kind of their best version of themselves. So if that isn't brought at the interview phase, I'm often thinking, what's it going to be like later on?
I'll read this
Great.
one out loud. Thoughts on a resume that show tremendous job jumping in a short amount of time? It's a new world. Years ago, this would have been a house fire.
Yeah.
From Kevin Martin here. Lori, I'll let you take that one.
So my thoughts are to ask why. And to see what their answer is. It actually isn't a red flag for me, but it's something open for further discussion. Same as I'd look at a job gap as well, because times are different for sure. But what I'd want to be interviewing for in this circumstance is resiliency. So how resilient are they? There actually may be really valid reasons. Maybe they moved a lot. Maybe they genuinely did have a few negative experiences, but the types of questions I'd be asking in that interview is like, how do you handle these types of situations, and ask a few situational or behavioral interview questions to really hone in on that resiliency, because that's the orange flag that it brings up for me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. As somebody that's had quite a few different careers since I graduated, I think it's certainly explainable, but I would certainly want to know why. What's causing that career jump? Is it because they're really looking for their right fit, their right industry? As somebody that has shifted industries entirely, I think that is an incredibly difficult thing to do and shows adaptability and curiosity. But as Lori really strongly pointed out there, we want to make sure that they're resilient for the problems that are coming up as well.
Yeah, I love that addition, Addie. Looks like the Yesenia has asked, how do you motivate? And we'll take one more question. We're happy to go 5 minutes over, but I believe Addie and I actually have a client call 10 minutes after. So we will stop on the 5 minutes. So Yesenia, how do you motivate high performing employees with a department that does not have much room for growth or promotions? I think both Addie and I have experience with that. So would you like to start, Addie, or would you prefer me to start?
Yeah. So I think that's really understanding, what is the most motivating thing to your team members, because I think all of us find a promotion motivating. All of us find, increase in compensation motivating. But there are a lot of other things that we all find motivating as well. If it's public recognition, if it's potentially an increase in responsibility or a shift in responsibility, something like that. And so it's really understanding, what is it that motivates that team member to do such a good job already? And are there things in your control that you can access there to help continue to motivate and encourage and nurture that high performer?
Absolutely. And I'll provide an example to that. So understanding like what really lights up team members. So some people are just really execution orientated and they love to have lots of jobs in a day, whereas others are more creative and they like to be involved more in the nuance. So understand what people are motivated by, setting goals based on those motivations. And another I'll provide an example actually before I go on to my other thought. I have so many thoughts on this question, Yesenia. So for example, here, actually, no, previously I had an employee that we couldn't promote just because there just wasn't any positions. So I asked what they were studying in their personal life, and what they were studying in their personal life was actually applicable to UI UX design on the customer on the product side. So even though they were in a customer facing position, I was able to get them on a mentorship program internally so they could learn some developers on UI UX design. So that's a tangible example in a different industry, but figuring out what they're curious and then providing them with some mentor opportunities might be really good. Another thing is, can you pitch to HR to get maybe a more advanced title? So in their resume, it's shown that, hey, they have been in this position for 6 years, but they actually went from, and I don't know what you call your listers. Some people call them data analysts, other people call them listers, but they went from a lister to a senior lister. So that's another idea to get them engaged and to show some sort of recognition with the title change there. Great. Well, if you do have any other questions, please do let us know. Also, for folks going to the Goodwill conference in November, the Goodwill Connect conference, I will be speaking on a similar topic. So for those who aren't a part of Goodwill, I will record it for you, so you can definitely get those gains too. But definitely come to that. I'll be speaking about neuro leadership principles there. So if you are curious about this topic, I'd love to see you there as well. Great. All right. Well, today was a really great session. Thanks for all your wonderful questions, and I will see you at the next masterclass in November. Bye.